On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very special treat. She's a legendary former professional volleyball player, fierce competitor, model, brilliant entrepreneur, reporter, world-class keynote speaker, New York Times best-selling author, podcast host of her hit show, inspirational health and fitness pioneer, and she was Nike's first female spokeswoman. She is the ultimate hybrid of beauty, athleticism, and brains, and she's an unbelievable mother and wife. She's just a juggernaut in all facets of life and a terrific human being. Please welcome the iconic, dynamic, gorgeous, gritty, tough as nails, multifaceted, and abundant Gabby Reece. How you doing, Gabby?
Wow, thank you. I don't think we should do the interview. Just leave it there and give me a chance to get away with that.
I always get a kick out of the guest reactions. And I always like to say, it's your story. You wrote it. I just said it.
Yeah. I don't know about that.
Well, how you doing? Good?
Yeah, everything is good. You know,
Yeah.
it's the perspective of how it's all going, I guess. That's the constant maintenance.
One of the many things I love about you is you're all about perspective. And isn't that the difference between someone that lives a very filling and amazing life and someone that doesn't, is their perspective?
Well, I think it is. I think it's having the opportunities and the space to be able to recognize what is sort of going well, and whatever perception of things that maybe are frustrating us in our life, sort of how important are they really on the grand scheme of things. So I think that's like brushing your teeth. That's something you work on every day, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And the good news is you can alter your perspective and you could change your experience.
Yes, I think so. I think sometimes everybody has their sequence of order. I think there's, like, for me personally, that's why I pursue trying to be as healthy as I can, because that sort of catapults me into a fighting chance to have that perspective. I think everyone is certainly different. I think there's people who are more emotionally based. I think there's people who are more analytical, and it's just each person trying to figure out their system and how they can arrive at the place to support that ability to try to look at the bright side.
Bang! We could also drop the mic right there, but we're just getting warmed up. And look, for the audience, we just hit 1 million downloads. If you're not familiar with Gabby, if you're living under a rock, I highly suggest you go check out what she's got going on, whether it be her Instagram, her website, her book, her podcast, all the things that she has going on. I think what's most valuable today is we just have an unbelievable conversation. Before we dive in, we're going to get a little weird. You ready for me?
Sure.
Gabby, what are some non-negotiables for you?
You know, my self-care practice, I'm pretty ruthless about. And I always joke, even with my kids and my husband, like, no, I am, because, you know, you're not a female, no offense, but when you are a female and then you start adding additional roles into your life, like being a partner to somebody or a mother, there's sort of more service that gets involved. And so you actually weirdly have to get more ruthless and cutthroat about, hey, this is my time. And unless somebody needs to go to the hospital, like, you know, stay out of it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it sounds harsh, but I'm like, you need that harshness to actually be better in the other things.
100%. It's like having that maniacal drive, and you say ruthless, and I laugh because I love the word, but it's so true. It's like the difference between having a goal and a commitment. Like, you need to be attached to these priorities, so you make sure that they get done and you fill your cup up.
Yeah. And I think within that, even you have this weird flexibility where you're going to have days where you had a plan, everybody has plans, and it doesn't get done. And I think sometimes the mistake for people who can be maniacal and ruthless is they just have locked in, like, I didn't get that done, I didn't do that. And I actually think that's another disservice. So it's like, how do you really quickly pivot and adapt and be like, yeah, that didn't get done today. And I did, by the way, eat that bagel that looked good, but why did I eat it? And then just like move on. You know,
That's it. Yeah. And speaking of bagels, I know you spent some time in Long Island. That's where I'm from. The bagels in Long Island are second to none. Just had to say that.
oh yeah. Is it really the water? I don't know what it is, but it's very good. And it's also that, like, butter, salty butter. I don't know. It's just a combination.
I don't know what it is, but they're doing something right.
They really are.
Yeah. Gabby, what is your superpower?
You know, I've been asked this before, and I think it's my natural inclination for homeostasis, which one wouldn't really attach to like, go get it. And, you know, like you said, maniacal, but there's a part of me that the minute that the tips of the wings are moving one side or the other, I have a natural inclination to get things into a homeostasis kind of point of view. So what that enables me to do, I believe, or I'm fooling myself, is I can take on quite a few different things, and sort of have the ability to see what needs to get dealt with when, and sort of not make everything feel overwhelming all at once.
Yeah, no, that's key. And that prevents being overwhelmed, right?
Yes, it's actually an incredibly boring trait. I'm married to a really intense, sort of very, you know, grindy, singular focused, commit, go all the way kind of person. And it's like, I'm in awe of it. I look at it, I go, that's amazing. And what he is able, and people like that are able to generate, is so cool. And mine is sort of very different and quiet, and also like, how do we bring all the pieces together, and how do we look at the full landscape? That seems to have been something that has really served me.
Yeah. And in case the audience doesn't know who you're referring to, your husband is Laird Hamilton, one of the most prolific and iconic surfers of all time. Obviously, just like any relationship, there's ups and downs, and it takes work. You guys are thriving. You've been married for a long time. I know the audience is going to be curious to hear this. What is your secret to a great, healthy relationship?
You know, again, every couple's different, right? Like, what makes it work? I think with Laird and I, there's a couple things that really have shown up over the years. One is, somehow both of us are hardwired to understand it's really our own responsibility to make ourselves feel fulfilled and satisfied. So I certainly wasn't geared or trained to like, oh, someone's going to come and rescue me. And Laird, you know, has a passion for the ocean, obviously, and he's very clear about the things that he needs. But both of us are also of service to the relationship. I think we knew that naturally, because we're also, no one's going to tell the other, like, you better do this. I love when people ask me that. They go, hey, do you tell Laird? Do you let Laird? I go, oh yeah, obviously, you know, that's not our dynamic, right? Like, and this kind of constant checks and balance, I think both of us are sort of tough, and we realize, oh, we're going to leave that at the door, because that's not really going to help in here. But what that does is it has this weird checks and balance that everybody sort of stays on their best game. And it's tiring. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's tiring to live that way. But the alternative is to kind of let things slip, and then you have to kind of, you know, reboot or rejigger, and everybody's got to come back up. So we just sort of keep this pretty high intense level, even down to like how we talk to each other. I mean, I am very, even to this day, very conscientious about the way that I talk to my husband, and that really does seem to work out.
Yeah, I love all of this. Only negative I got going on is we don't have 10 hours to chat, straight up. And my girlfriend just moved in with me, and we're excited, and I'm glad I never settled, because when you find the one, you know it, as I know that you did too. But something that you described right there, you didn't say the word, but you described it, and a big component that I think based upon relationships is respect. And you mentioned like the language that you speak to each other, that plays into that, right?
Yeah, but I'm going to give you an example. I was just recently with a couple. I don't know if you know a company, Dear Media. They have tons of podcasts, and it's run by a couple, Michael and Lauren Bostic, and they've been together literally since like 7th or 8th grade or whatever, like a very long time. And we were saying that she's very playful. Like, I'm not that playful, really. And so she can say something to her husband that comes out kind of loving and playful, like, oh, you know, it could be like, not like, don't be an idiot, but you know what I mean? Like something like that. And when I say something like that, it comes out like I'm dead serious. And so it's even knowing within your coupletums, what are your dynamics and your personalities that like sort of what doesn't cross the line, where me, when I say something, for example, maybe it's like, well, that was mean, Gabby. It's like, was it? You know? So I think it's also all that nuance too.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. This is gripping stuff. And also, obviously, I just want to acknowledge you. You said that one of the things that's a priority for both of you is that you both go out individually and achieve success or happiness, whatever that looks like for each of you. And then you come together and you have the relationship. It's not like somebody's trying to change the other, which I made the mistake in the past of being in a relationship with that. And it was just inauthentic.
It just doesn't work,
Yeah.
and early on my relationship with Laird, he said unfortunately, Laird's mother passed away like 2 years into our relationship. And he said to me, like, I had a mother and she passed away. And I was like, Roger that. Like the natural tendency, especially I think for females, is to mother everybody, right? Like, oh, you're talking loud. That joke was inappropriate, whatever we do, right? And I have it too. I have to fight it. And it's like, yeah, no, that's off the table. Like, you're not my mother. And conversely, like I do that with Laird. Like we have 3 daughters and sometimes I get thrown in the mix and he's like, you girls, da, da, da. And I'm like, oh, no. Like I'm your partner. I'm not your daughter. So I think it's just having very polite boundaries that everybody's aware, because I think what it does is it just makes all of us act in our better sides.
Yep.
I mean, we all have all the sides. I have, better sides and not great sides. And you're in these environments where it's like, oh, this is bringing out the better side of me.
Yeah. This is riveting. Love all of this. Use the word boundaries there. And also, because I'm a fan, obviously I did the homework, but also I wanted to show this conversation the respect it deserves. You talk often about boundaries and not living onto like the glory days of the past, but still like where you're at now in your life, you're constantly testing the limits and reaching new boundaries. And I think that's one of the reasons that makes you guys so exciting and innovative and keeps you young in the grand scheme of things, because you always have new milestones or new goals to latch onto. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us it's so easy to get caught into, you said you've had a career change, right? So we get caught into identity. It's so natural, to do that. But the problem is it's limiting and it's trapped and everything is always changing. They say that everything changes actually, except for one thing, and that's flow state. Flow state apparently is always the same, but pretty much everything else in life is always changing. So my thinking is, instead of, when people get this whole thing of like, oh, I've got to reinvent myself. Well, that's in a way, there's something just not organic about that, where versus you're living your real life and you're curious and you're moving into things that you genuinely want to learn or know more about, then that just starts getting reflected either in your life, your relationships, your friendships, but it also bleeds over then into your professional life. You know this very well from what you're doing, where you go, wow, this might feel like the next place I'm going, and being okay with letting go with like, yeah, you were good at something. And that's yesterday. And it's okay to let that go.
Yeah, that's 100% right. Like you don't have to change who you are. Maybe you just upgrade your identity a little bit and try new things and step into new arenas and so forth. I'm just curious. You mentioned that the only thing that stays the same is flow state. I never heard that articulated like that. What do you mean by that?
Well, I wish I was smart enough to be the one, but Stephen Kotler, who writes all about flow state, he interviewed Laird once and he said he didn't understand what it meant, but he learned later. He was interviewing Laird about flow state because obviously sports like surfing or, snowboarding or things like that, you go into flow, or football, you have moments of flow state. Laird said, the thing is it is, and you are, and that's that. Right. So when we enter into flow state, apparently that is something that is a constant and always the same. And it might be, I don't know. Again, I'm not clever enough to know this, but I don't know what else in life is never changing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I like the way you articulated it. That's interesting. Something to really dive into. In regards to Laird, I know he's not really big into social media and stuff like that. I think I've heard you say that you run his account for business purposes and stuff like that. I heard you speaking somewhat recently about he caught heat for something, and he really just doesn't care about that stuff, which is great. Because you shouldn't care about the opinions of others if they're not relevant to you. It's a waste of time and energy. And I heard you give the reason why, and you articulated it so beautifully. You said something like, entanglement is existence. Is that right?
Well, exactly. Right. So, this Byron Katie says, what you think of me is none of my business. And so the minute that we are entangled, now we're in reality. And so I don't know if you've ever experienced this, like you could have a friend or a family member and all of a sudden like they're in a hassle with you, and you sort of, if you find the way to sort of be like, yeah, I'm not doing that, all of a sudden they're in a hassle with themselves, and you might be part of their story. You might be an actor in their play, but you're not impacted by that. And so I think it's really important when we learn not to bite into something, because if we don't, then actually that's got nothing to do with us. And so Laird is very good at that. I think I'm less good at that, but I certainly through time have really learned or appreciated and incorporated more of that response.
That's awesome. And not like you want to get revenge because that's immature, but like I read somewhere that like oblivion is the best revenge, meaning like just don't even acknowledge it. And
yeah, I think you can, you know, what's also helpful is, let's say someone's really upset with us or they're whatever, you know, we may not understand what's going on with them. And so I think also weirdly, like you ever hear like more religious people say, well, you know, pray for them, right? But there's something to be said for having compassion for somebody, even if they're angry with you and trying to actually maybe even be harmful to you, to sort of in your mind, rather than have that same response, because that's a fear response, right? Like when we get angry and like, oh, this person, why are they messing with me? I'm going to show them. It's like, well, that's your fear. But if you can be like, wow, they must be in some pain or they're frustrated. I think I don't love the fact that it's sort of, some of it's directed at me, but I'm going to send them compassion, because what's great about that is it diffuses for you. And so when people talk about forgiveness and all that, at the end of the day, that's not being a good person. That's being smart, because you're taking the impact off yourself.
right. Bye. It's got
I mean,
nuggets.
it's an old, simple notion that we've discussed over and over, but when you practice it, also the easier it gets. You know, like
Like anything.
exactly. And you know, sometimes when people go like, I want to show you how powerful I am, how strong I am, how macho I am, I can dominate you. This gets people into situations where they're spinning tire, where if you go, oh, you know what, you're right. Oh, you know what, you're the tough guy. Cool, you win. You right. What it does is it liberates us. And I have to say that every masterful, or people who are more masterful that I know, male or female, but especially it shows up in the men, is when they go, how can I avoid conflict? How do I move either away from it or towards resolution? This for me is the ultimate power, versus when people got to show you that they're right and how tough they are. And that takes also quite a lot of energy.
Yeah, for sure. This is awesome. I can't not bring up health, fitness, and nutrition. It's a big part of your life. You guys run a superfood company and stuff like that. It's funny because I always worked out like in the gym, not professionally or anything like that, but that was my outlet for 15 years, lifting weights. A couple of years back, I got into running. And I was just so fascinated with how, in my opinion, running marathons is such a metaphor for life, because as long as you're physically able to put one foot in front of the other, it's the voice in the head that you have to combat. But one of the ways I was able to really get successful at the marathons was understanding for the first time nutrition and being educated. Like you cannot out-train a bad diet. When did you first realize that?
I was probably, you know, in my mid-20s. I was competing, and you just start to correlate like how you're feeling, energy level, access to energy, recovery. Okay, if I had 2 games versus 3 games, what different little things could I do to improve? And that usually came through nutrition and other forms of preparation. I think what also is very important to tack onto that message, though, is that what will work for you will be different than what works for me. And so within that is also people really just putting a little bit of effort towards, well, how do I feel when I eat meat? How do I feel when I eat complex carbohydrates? They even have tests that people can do, genetic tests, swabs of your mouth. Even though genetics is 20% of the deal, there are people who are very successful on complex carbs and other people who can't. So it's also encouraging people, like it's 80% of the deal, nutrition, but even within that, you know, we're all different.
Yeah, for sure. I love this. And it's so true. It's not apples to apples with every single person. People react differently or respond differently to different foods, different nutrition, and so forth.
And
Right
that
now,
makes it confusing, because you'll see people out there who are like, only eat plants, and people are like, only eat meat. It's like, well, that might work for groups, and we have to honor that. But absolutes generally, especially when you talk about health, those provide a problem.
Case by case.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure the audience is curious. I am as well. Right now, with the season that you're in, what is your current fitness routine?
So Tuesday, I've been navigating a torn labrum in my hip. And so I have sort of some workarounds, but Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I do pool training. So we have an underwater pool training where we use dumbbells. And so you can do hypoxic training and ballistic training, very kind on your joints. I actually have a stand-up elliptigo. I don't know if you know what those are. They're kind of these sliders, but they go up, they move. And I have a very big hill outside my house. So I ride my elliptigo maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And then I will do some form of HIIT training 2 or 3 times a week. And when I need to rest or I'm too busy, I do nothing.
Yeah. Isn't there power in that? I used to think it had to be go, go, go until I realized like you need to reset a little bit mentally and physically.
Well, that's it. I think people have to think of this word supple. And so what happens is when we go, 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 right? I think we get dry. And I mean that like metaphorically, intellectually, spiritually, and even like our muscle tissue. And so sometimes you have these people who they are go-getters and it's awesome, but they have to be careful that they don't turn that gun back on themselves, because it's like, well, this is what I do. It's like, yeah, and today might be a good day to take off and make sure you're hydrated and stretch. And it's not a win because you didn't do it.
Yeah, this is awesome. Straight up. Pivoting for a second, I'm a big believer in when I started my CLS brand and the personal development, people always ask me like, you know, isn't it tough, or like, weren't you scared to step into a new arena from Wall Street, so to speak? And my thought process was like, I knew that it's not going to go up in a straight line. Nothing does. But if you put in the work and you pay the price, you're resourceful and creative enough to make it work. I've heard you say also in the past that you like to pay the price, but you like to do it in advance. How important is that to you?
Well, I think that's a straightforward, transaction. I even say it in like my personal relationships. Like, I don't want to pay in 30 years and one of my kids comes back and goes, all these things you tweaked me. I'd rather just get hit every day and they go, this sucked. Okay, let me look at that, or whatever it is. And the same with work. I'd rather grind it out than sort of have maybe, and having said all that, what I want to sort of put a kind of a caveat in there is, let's say you've had somebody working in a field for a really long time and they've had success, and maybe the next thing they're doing is sort of an extension of that, so they get a bigger success easier. Don't fight that either. Like, that's okay. So I also want to say, like, we have to be mindful of what that formula looks like. But you said it earlier, and I've heard it best said by Ryan Holiday, who wrote Ego is the Enemy, is body of evidence. If we can do one thing, and we're being realistic about the next thing we're doing, it's sort of like, yes, some of my skill set could be expressed here, my natural talents, that you have the body of evidence that you don't know, but that you have the confidence that you can at least try to figure it out.
Yeah, hell yeah. And success leaves clues, right?
Well, absolutely. But then having said all that, sometimes we are not going to do it a way that another person. But it's been interesting for me, like even doing the podcast, I don't learn in bullet patterns. Like, for example, Tony Robbins, Jim Quick, people like this, they're able to condense everything and go da 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 da, do it like this. And I don't learn that way. But what I realize is a lot of people do. So that's the other thing, is what way do you learn and what works for you?
Yeah, no.
Ed Milet, I mean, he's like, da da da, do it like this. And what you realize is a lot of people, that's their jam.
Yeah. Ed was just on the show last week. It's funny. No, I know the style that you're referring to, but everybody's different, and you have to learn how to learn. And people accumulate knowledge and wisdom and put it together in different strategies.
Right. And that was the thing. I think before I only responded to the things that I responded to. And then I started to open my mind more and be like, but wait a second, this is very helpful and beneficial to a lot of people because that's how they do it.
Yep. 100%. I know that you often say that you weren't groomed for success. I wanted to ask you about what you meant by that. And also, you often say, and I agree with this, that we should all be unapologetic about wanting to win. Sometimes society frowns upon that, like wanting to win, like not being arrogant, but wanting to win in life. Tell me what you mean by you weren't groomed for success, Gabby.
Well, just the way I was raised, I have, you'll see people who like their parents have professions. Somebody's a lawyer, a doctor, or something. They went to a good school, whatever that means. I didn't really have that. I had pretty freewheeling adults around me, and I had no notion of even going to college until my senior year of high school. It was never even a thought. And so it was really an unusual gear shift for me to go from being like, yeah, just kind of bopping along. And then all of a sudden, going to college on an athletic scholarship and then being around all these people that were sort of high achieving, hardworking. I was like, oh, wait a second. And I naturally have some of these tendencies in my personality. I mean, I've always been sort of very organized and disciplined. And that was from when I was a little kid.
Yep.
But this was a different thing. And I've had friends, other athletes that were told by their community and their parents and their families, like, oh, you can do it. And I didn't understand. I didn't know that. I didn't learn that. And also I never felt like I deserved, because we don't really deserve it, but in this way of like, oh, is it okay to win? I didn't understand that language.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then you obviously have to make a shift at some point to be able to have the amount of success that you've had, specifically in sport and so forth in the beginning. How did you make that perspective change?
The way I do it for me personally, because everyone's different,
Sure.
is I'm in the pursuit of excellence. So in everything. So it's not about winning per se, because winning is fleeting, and it looks at like a lot of different things. It's like the word success. It's like what that means to one person versus another. So for me, it's like, okay, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it at the best of my ability. When it's quote game time, whether it's work or on volleyball, at that time, it's like, okay, well, let me show up and try to implement the things that I've been in practice doing. If the end goal is to come out ahead of the team I'm playing, then let's make that the goal. So it's sort of saying, how can I execute to the best of my ability? How can I be as prepared to the best of my ability? How can I be the best teammate? How can I also be creative? Because see, a lot of this is linear. But within all of this, I still have to be thinking creatively about the approach, about the long-term story, about all of it. So it's like, well, how do these pieces fit together? How do you amplify the story? How does one business support another business? And all of those things. So it's a linear structure with a kind of a creative tone through it.
Yeah, this is great stuff. Preparation breeds confidence. I'm a big believer in that. You mentioned preparation. Do you agree with that?
I do. And then sometimes you're going to be, you sort of trained enough in whatever you're doing, and you're going to have things that come up that you don't feel prepared for. And that's when you say, you know what, I'm going to trust that somewhere within me, I'm going to figure this out on the fly. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time thinking about like, oh, I didn't expect this.
Yeah.
So it's both, right? It's like, because we don't want to get in our own way. I've done that many times. So
Same.
sometimes it's like, well, I didn't. It's like, yeah, you didn't. And because at the top, the king is always going to be adaptability in whatever you're talking about, right? In life, in health, in work, in relationships, it's always about adaptability. So if we can get to that place, I think that that's sort of an interesting way to try to live when it's necessary.
You got to be adaptable. Spoiler alert, right? Like life is unpredictable. You could be expecting a fastball, you get a change up. That's a part of life. You could do the work. And like you said, like specifically, like I'm running a race tomorrow morning, the Brooklyn Half Marathon, just a little guy, but you never know what comes up, right? Like in those things. And sometimes you can't prepare for every single potential outcome, but you trust the process.
Yeah. And you can't, when it shows up, freak out and be like, I didn't know my little toe was going to bother me. Like, it's like, it is what it is as well, right? Like you heard from
100%.
me. It's
Yeah.
like, it is what it is. And so I think within adaptability is acceptance. And I think acceptance is also a really important notion.
In all facets of life.
In everything. I'm at a place in my life where I'm interested in the things that are the kind of more pinnacle for if you were going to talk about anything, because then that shows up at the times it needs to, versus, well, in athletics, we do this, in business, we do that, in our relationships. It's like, no, what are the key things that are the umbrella for all these things that feel pretty important? And then kind of see if you can tune in and develop that in a bigger way.
Bang. I love this. It's so true. Like, what are the key components that are transferable or universal, whether it's being a mom, right? Starting a company, speaking, writing a book, playing volleyball. There's certain traits that are pivotal for all those different arenas, right?
That's right. So I think that I have, for the last maybe 10 years, really tried to stay lined up with that as much as I can. And then, build in the things that will support me doing that more often.
Yeah. Just curious, off topic. What do you miss most about competing professionally?
There's something really honest about practicing competition, that you also are highly exposed. And there's something really, just like I said, honest and difficult. And so just to know yourself in these difficult, honest places can be really empowering. And I enjoyed, being on a team. I enjoyed those few moments of like, you had a moment where it worked perfectly, the harmony, all of it. So I think it's that for me, but I think there's other opportunities, but sport really, kind of concentrates that experience.
Yeah, it does. I understand. Yeah. And you mentioned other opportunities. You're doing so much. You wear so many different hats. You've been successful in so many different industries. You keep innovating, and it's exciting and it's fun to watch. Of all the cool things you have going on right now, what are you most excited about?
Well, we have Laird Superfood, our coffee and creamer business that we took public a year and a half ago. And
Congrats.
actually, yeah, and we're getting our ass on the stock market right now. But that's also, if you want to talk about learning, you're like, oh, okay. And there were some plans in place, and that, whatever. But the growth of the company, sales are up, the products are excellent. So I really love that product. And it's interesting to do something that's a reoccurring business. We've never done that before. So that's sort of really great. Our fitness business, I really love, because it goes back to that genuine kind of nakedness, like, here you are. And also being experimental still in whether it's your nutritional life or just all dimensions of movement. I really like that, because we also get access to some of the smartest people that I know that teach us. So I really enjoy that process. And with the podcast, I love it, as you can relate to, because there's forced learning. So I have to read a lot of books and do a lot of things. And so it sort of keeps me in forced learning. So in my mentality, I will do a lot for work. So would I sit and read a book for enjoyment? Maybe not as often. Well, okay, I'm gonna have this guy on, I'm gonna read this book. So I kind of like that I'm creating an environment to sort of keep connecting to people and new ideas.
Yes. And one of the coolest things that I love about the podcast is that it's a good way to form great relationships and new connections like we are today, and maybe meet people that you might not have had the chance to, and ultimately learn something, because we don't know what we don't know. We're always learning from people in different assets.
Yeah. And for me, there's still always a level. And listen, I've been interviewing people since 1992.
Yep.
But I don't even know if you were born then.
I was born 85.
Yeah. So, but it's like this, there's just always a little like amount of stress. I feel relaxed, but it's like, oh, well, I hope this goes well. I hope I do my job well. And I think that's good. I think it's good to do things that make you just a little uncomfortable. And that also, sort of goes back to sport, because whenever we do it, we're always a little like, oh, here we go, and so I like that.
What a beautiful message. And is that not the epitome of growth in life? Is growth not usually on the backside of pain or putting yourself in uncomfortable situations?
It is. And there's something else to that, which is when we can, I say this a lot, when we can come in, we can get in touch with, we're none of us are really special, but we all are special. Like we're no one, but we're all somebody. I think when we can sort of also look at ourselves like we're not that important, that really frees you up to be like, okay, let's see what happens.
Yeah. Release the expectation, or as I like to say, marry the process, divorce the outcome, surrender and flow.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I'm curious. I want to ask you, I've interviewed some of the world's greats, and I love to ask them this because I usually get a different answer. What is your position or thoughts on the law of attraction and the power of intention and stuff like that? It was something I was really skeptical for a while because it's beyond my senses. But then about 6 months ago, I was at a big speaking engagement. I ended up getting injured. Turned out there was a tumor in my foot, which I definitely did not see coming. Had the surgery, came back benign, thank God. And this was all while I was training for a marathon. And while the marathon was coming closer, I couldn't train. There was a hole in my foot. I was recovering. And then I said, if there was ever a time, it would be now. I really started diving into the quantum stuff, the law of attraction, frequencies and vibrations. And I can't stop talking about this stuff ever since. I ended up getting to the New York City Marathon with no physical training, running as fast as I ever ran. And I'm just in a different frequency right now. And I'm just curious, what is your thoughts on the law of attraction and that type of woo-woo type of stuff?
Yeah. And again, like even my birth symbol is a Capricorn. I'm like one of the most grounded, overly grounded people. It's obnoxious. Like I'm a person who, like, if you brought me flowers, I really love them. But if I was going to go to the store, as I was going to buy them, I might be like, well, they'll be good for like 3 to 5 days. Then it's all going to fall. And then I have to clean that up. And then, okay, never mind. Right. Like it's terrible. And so I would say that as I've moved through and met a lot of people, what you start to learn is we have no idea about what's going on. And, when people go like, is this a simulation? It's quite possible. And this notion of vibration is probably everything, because even if you talk to people who are into care, I met a guy who's a medical tourist. Okay. And I said, well, what in the future, what is it? And he's like, it's all vibration. And if you think about before, if we were in tribes and villages, it was all about, drums and chanting and spirit and connecting with a vibration. So I think it's true. Now, if our intention or our reason is like, please God, bring me that so I can make tons of cash, I don't know if that works necessarily. And it might, because we see certain people, but it absolutely does. And I have a very dear friend who said to me, he asked me if I pray for my children. And I was like, I do. And he said, well, pray as if it's already happened. And so I think sometimes there's something for that, which is like, I don't see it yet. I don't know, but thank you for that.
Yep.
And just a level of acceptance that the universe is conspiring for all of us.
Hell yeah.
Even when we don't know.
This is really deep stuff. And I'm very familiar with that, called future gratitude, like saying thank you for something that didn't even happen yet. But your body doesn't know the difference. So you're putting yourself in that frequency.
But they feel it too. That's the other thing that's important. Like with my kids, what I've learned is when I'm worried about them,
yep.
If they see, it's like I've had coaches that look at me and I'm scared and they go, oh, you got this. And so in that moment, I'm like, oh, they know something or see something about me I don't. Yep. And what I've tried to do with my kids is like, oh, you're going to figure it out. So that when they're not sure, they're wobbly, they look at me and I'm not a confirmation of them being in a bad place, but I'm a confirmation of someone who's like, I believe in you. You're going to get it dialed.
That's awesome. It's a vibe, right? It's a frequency, and it's a mirror. The universe is a mirror. Like I came across this quote actually this week. It's like, you don't manifest what you want, you manifest what you are. So like you said, like you could want all the money you want, but if you're not in that frequency of really believing that you're wealthy or that you're deserving or that you're worthy, the universe is just going to keep giving you what you are. And so for the messages for the audience, like for anybody that's not receiving what they want, that's a clue to be aware and say, what am I really projecting right now, good or bad? Because that's what you're getting back.
Yeah. And I actually personally fight that quite a bit. I feel always like I want to be working for everything. I don't want to be separated, right? Because this idea of like success and money sometimes creates separation. And so I've actually had to look at that myself where I'm like, not everything has to be like really hard,
Sure.
because then, like you said, then I'll deserve it. Oh, I have earned it. It's like
Yeah.
sometimes just being able to say, thank you. And I have friends like that and I'm in awe of them. Like, they're just like, isn't it great? I'm like, it's amazing.
Yeah. But the good news is this is something we could work on, just like anything else.
Totally.
Yeah. You're on fire and you can't be stopped. You mentioned your kids. I know how important it is to you. The most important job is being a mom and motherhood and stuff like that. The audience is full of moms and so forth. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned that what makes a great mom, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I would encourage anyone who's parenting, period, to do it their authentic self, right? Like, I see women to the left and right of me, and they're like really like, there's this sweetness to them, and then all of a sudden they're like, we did a fairy play today, and we built a set, and like, that's not me, right? And so I used to be like, oh my God, I suck. So first, I would say to people, like, just accept in a way your way. It doesn't mean we're not going to improve, but it's just everyone is different. So there's no one way. As far as like universally great parenting, Laird always says, if he's caught me like really having a day of it, especially when they were younger, like, oh my God. And because then you're like, am I too hard? Am I not hard enough? Do I love them too much? Do I spoil them? Do I not spoil them? Whatever it is. And he's like, well, you're here and you love them. So I'd say, like, from a fundamental, for people who can just show up, this is very powerful. And beyond that, two things I learned that were important that felt really universal were, listen, don't fix it. Just be like, oh, and don't ask I don't ask a ton of questions, especially my teenagers. I do ask permission to ask questions. Like, if they're sharing, like, I was at this party and blah blah blah, we want to interject and be like, well, why did she drink that much or whatever? Because our fear's coming out. Hey, can I ask a question? Oh, hey, can I make a comment? Especially with daughters, and they'll tell you. And so listening. And another piece of advice given to me by Byron Katie was, and make yourself happy so they know what it looks like. Because ultimately, you are a model to your children. And we think we can blah, 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 all the way to all what they should do. Make yourself happy so they know what it looks like. And so I thought that felt really important.
Yeah. This is the second time you kind of went back to that. I could tell how important this is to you earlier in the conversation when you said, like, when they're looking some sort of way, you give off the vibe like, oh, you got this, you're going to figure it out because they're a model.
Yeah. And being open, I think if you are within a partnership, if they can see conflict resolution and things like that, I think all of that is really important, because then you're helping them develop the skills, communication and otherwise.
Yeah. And they're a sponge, especially when you're their hero and so forth. They're going to look at what you do and how you operate.
I think you're only their hero till they're like 6 or 7, right?
Is that right?
And then there's a natural breaking away because they must become their own person. So what you will find a lot of times, especially if you have either strong parents, strong children, is a very deliberate departure from what you are, because they must claim themselves.
Their own identity.
So if you're dominating or you have like some pretty intense things around you and your kids have been encouraged, they will push against it, and you want them to.
Yeah, this is awesome. And like I said, I wish we had 20 hours to chat. We'll land the plane with this. The audience was really excited when they knew you were going to be on the show. So we always like to take one question from the audience. One of them asked you this: coping mechanisms for stress and anxiety. You're outspoken about that. A lot of people deal with this. What is one tool or strategy that you utilize to cope with that?
That is why I exercise, but also if you just talked from a physiological standpoint, we should all be nose breathing and not mouth breathing. It keeps you in a down-regulated state. When you mouth breathe, it's shallow, it's chest, it's a horizontal breath. If you nose breathe, it's in the tummy. You will breathe, instead of 10 to 15 breaths a minute, you'll go to maybe hopefully 3 or 4. And so you'll stay in a calmer place already. You'll be in your parasympathetic more often than in your sympathetic. So just from a very easy tool, unless you're running a marathon or doing sprints, keep your mouth closed and nose breathe deep into your belly. For my girls out there, do not suck in your belly when you don't need to. Breathe in and let that thing open up and be soft. And just, pay attention to what is great. And the more you can take care of yourself, I always say it's the armor to navigate life. It isn't about like, I fit in my jeans from high school. It's like, no, I'm better at what I'm trying to deal with because I exercise a little bit and I'm not eating a bunch of crap. And it's really that simple for me. It's not about being an athlete.
Yeah, I love that. And it's all correlated, right? Like you exercise a little, then look good, feel good, then it's contagious. You want to stay in that frequency. You kind of want to avoid eating like crap and so forth.
Yeah. And for people too, I think what happens is we think perfection is the objective. I think that is a very hard thing to uphold and creates a lot of unnecessary stress. So why are we gunning for that? Why are we gunning to look perfect, to act perfect, to have a perfect house, a car, relationship, dog, and my kid's hair is always brushed? It's like, who cares? Like at some point, let's pick what feels really valuable to us and make that as the high polish that we, create the highest polish we can. And maybe that's our integrity or our knowledge about a topic or what have you, not like, look, everyone, look how perfect it is.
Yeah. Gab's got nuggets. This is awesome. I wanted to have a great conversation with you today and talk about some stuff that you don't typically talk about. I know you often talk about your husband and so forth. This was awesome. It was different. The community is so loyal and engaging. It's exploding. What's the best way for the audience community to support you, Gab?
Well, they can come see me on Instagram. I'm Gabby Reece, and Reece is with a C. And then my podcast is the Gabby Reece Show. And I have a lot of, kind of scientists and doctors and mental health specialists and athletes and things like that. So if they're in the mood for those kinds of things, I try to break what I say high-end information or sharp-end information and put it sort of at a 5th or 6th grade level so that we could actually apply it into our real lives because people are busy.
That's the thing. And I'm so glad that you said that because a lot of those people in the field, and I've interviewed a bunch too, like they're very smart, but they don't always make it they don't make it digestible. You want to be able to apply this.
Yeah. It's like, what does that mean? I get it. So I really love that space because I always feel like very high performance people, especially when you're talking about science, they're already taken care of. They're getting their macronutrients, their micronutrients. They already know. It's sort of everyone else who's really busting their ass and just trying to keep their nose above water, make it happen. I'm interested in trying to make that communicate to them.
That's it. Gab, how can I personally support you?
You did. We had a great conversation and you were thoughtful and you were prepared. And I always really admire that. And I think it's like with my friends, when I look around and I see other people trying, all that does is fuel me back and be like, you know what? There's a lot of people trying. And that I think is one of the greatest things we could do for each other.
I love it. My intuition serves me right. It's just the beginning of the friendship. I love to do more. Gab, I want you to know you're the definition of perspective, heart, and growth. From taking your life experience to spreading positivity, light, and deep truths. You're a true gladiator, visionary, role model, and beacon of hope for anybody coming up today with big goals and aspirations. I can personally guarantee your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless nuggets today.
Well, listen, we're all in it together. So thank you for the time.
That was an awesome conversation. Thank you, Gabby.
Of course.
Yeah. You got a busy rest of the day?
I do. I have another interview. I like I said, I already had a 2-hour marketing call this morning, talking about ingredients and such. And so, yeah, but good. I mean, how else would you have it?
That's it. You love what you do. It's very obvious. I'm curious, when you do like a lot of interviews and stuff like that, do you schedule them like one day so that you're in that frequency, or do you spread them out?
Usually I try to consolidate just so if I'm in one spot, but to be honest, me being interviewed, I can do, I can be in the moment pretty easily with it. So I don't need to ramp up to be in an interview. If I pay attention to what you're saying, I can think about what I'm feeling and answer it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need to be like, but it just makes it easier if I go dunk, 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 and then I knock it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Literally,
Yeah.
if there's anything I could do to support as the brand is exploding, I'm always here for it. If you're ever
Thank you.
looking for a guest on your show, anything I could do.
Okay.
But seriously, thank you for the time and looking forward to building the friendship.
Thank you. And congratulations for you.
Thank you so much, Gabby. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Aloha.
Aloha. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.